Hi, I'm Mike Glenn. I am the president of the Engaged Church Network, and this is our podcast. We're glad you dropped by. Joining me today is Jay Strother. Jay Strother is the senior pastor of Brentwood Baptist Church.
How does that sound?
Still not easy for me to say. Jay has been the pastor for Brentwood Baptist Church for 11 months.
That's right. Coming up on a year.
Coming up on a year. As most of you know, Jay followed me, and I preached the first part of the sermon, and then I gave the pulpit to Jay, and he's had it ever since. Because he and I have known each other and been working together for 20 years because we are such good friends, we do have the opportunity to talk about an interesting process that is kind of out there, but nobody has the opportunity to talk about it. And that is how you work through the transition of becoming a new pastor, how you follow a pastor who's been there a while, and all of those details that can make or break a ministry in those first handful of months. Now, it hurts my feelings to tell you how well Jay's been doing since taking over in the lead chair. But what were you telling me yesterday? Attendance is up 11, 13%, giving's up double digits as well. So,
we're grateful.
Yeah, it hurts me bad to see how well they're doing without me. But and over lunch yesterday, I said, hey, let's talk about what it is like to come in. Even though you were part of the church team.
That's right.
There were no surprises. You knew the church knew you. But there is still this challenge that you have to overcome. So my first question is you were on the team, now you are the lead of the team. Yeah. So what'd you learn?
Yeah. Well, you sit there as a staff member for all these years, and you think, I'd do it this way if I was in charge, and then you're the guy in charge, and you realize why you have to do it a certain way. It's definitely humbling. No, I was thinking about this, Mike, in preparation for today. I think if you want to put some big rocks in the jar, all pastors, everybody believes, right? Theologically, the church is bigger than you are.
Right.
But unfortunately, a lot of pastors don't act that way in their practice. They think it all depends on them. And so one of the things I appreciated so much, over the years was your humility and your being able to squint and see the future, as you would call it. Still very focused, right? Eyes wide open on the present and the challenges in front of us. But as you would squint and see the future, you recognized, hey, we've got to begin to cultivate and develop leaders within the church. And so you were very good at giving some of the other campus pastors opportunities. We both played basketball growing up. Looks at the basket, right? You only get better at layups by shooting more layups. You only get better at preaching by getting in the pulpit.
Right.
And so your willingness to, put us in the pulpit instead of, we're in Nashville, we're in a large church, you could have had A-list communicators step in. Instead, you gave us the opportunity to earn reps.
Right.
You gave us the opportunity to preach sometimes even back to back. I mean, it meant you got 2 weeks off,
That's right.
Which is smart. But how many guys just think, no, it's got to be me. It's got to be me all the time, and are not willing to develop leaders. So I think looking back, that was really crucial for this moment for me. That in other words, I stepped into this moment not feeling ill-equipped or unprepared. Now, the thing that you have to grapple with is again, you've had to learn in your ministry. You start out, all of us doing ministry at runway level stuff.
Right.
You're planning the youth pizza party, and you're figuring out how many buses it takes to get to camp. And then you're teaching Bible studies, and then now you're at a whole nother level where you really have to, as the leadership principle goes, look from the balcony but listen from the floor.
Right.
And so I think you used to talk about it takes a lot of time staring at the wall. Trying to discern the threads. Holy Spirit, what are you doing? What are the patterns and trends we're seeing? And then, the spiritual disciplines, long interrupted time in the Word to be sure that you hear from God clearly so that you can put that into practice in your ministry. Because it's all going to rise and fall on how closely you follow the biblical model of what God lays in front of you.
You came in, church is healthy, church is good, but even in the best situations, change has to happen. I mean, we've talked about this. One of the reasons I stepped down when I did was I recognized that there was change on the horizon. a change that would last anywhere from 2 to 5 years, depending on all of the ramifications. I didn't feel like I could commit the energy that it would need to take through that. So it was an advantageous time to walk through that. Jesus talks about going through your bag and keeping the good and throwing out the old and that kind of stuff. So how did you discern? What process did you use to say, hey, this process is tried and true?
Yeah.
We're going to keep this. This needs to be modified.
Yeah.
We don't need to keep doing this.
Sure. Yeah, great question. So year one, Mike, I committed to a couple of things. Number one, I tried to listen to you well over the years, and I remembered that a long time ago you said, hey, when I first became pastor of Brentwood Baptist Church 33 years ago, if I could make one change, I would have drank more coffee and ate more pie.
That's exactly right.
And of course, what you mean by that is that I would have just spent a little bit more time getting into the culture. Now, I had a benefit you didn't have coming from South Carolina, 23 years, as part of that church family. Even though I'd pastored another campus now for 15 of those years, I still was with the leadership meeting. So I had a head start, so to speak. But I decided, for example, I was going to sit down with every staff member year one and just, hear their story. What 3 things is God doing in your ministry? What 3 ways can I pray for you? So that I could begin to draw out some of those threads.
These are people that you knew.
Oh, yeah.
You had worked with for a long time.
Yeah, a lot of them. Yeah.
But it changes when you're the lead pastor.
It does. And that's what you begin to understand. It is funny because I feel like, it's the same old Jay, but I laugh at we have a quarterly staff meeting where we bring together all 200 staff members. And, I'd always sit at a table with all the guys and you're joking around. All of a sudden I sat down and nobody sat next to me. I was like, what did I and then you realize it's because you're the senior pastor now. And it's just a different seat, like you said. So it's a reestablishing of those relationships. And I was trying to draw out and discern, where we're at as a church. Also, we have a good system. We're grateful that God's enabled us to put in a good system. So you use the term sometimes system quarterback, I'm that in a sense. Again, plays change, defenses adjust, you have to adjust. So let me give you the most practical example I can think of. We have a really solid mission statement that we developed 6-7 years ago, engaging the whole person with the whole gospel of Jesus Christ, anywhere, anytime, with anybody. That's not dependent on church programs or four walls of a church. So we're keeping that. We have 5 really solid biblical values. We're keeping that. What I began to recognize was we were 7 years into the 5-year vision that we had cast, which is kind of the picture. This is what ministry should look like. So we took the old one, and I went through a process, beginning with our executive leadership team, took it to the campus pastors, took it to the trustees of saying, what does that need to look like for the next 5 years? And so that's something that we updated. So our new vision statement that we just rolled out at a church-wide summit is that we fuel a disciple-making church multiplication movement in Middle Tennessee and beyond that eventually will share the gospel with millions, that will meet community needs by the thousands, and will end up producing 100+ healthy churches in partnership with people like the Engaged Church Network. And so, for example, and you're talking about how things change. So it was interesting when I talked about community needs by the thousands. There's been several spheres as a church that you always led us to be involved with: schools in the community, poverty, right, healthcare initiatives, those kind of things, platforms that the church has traditionally engaged their community by. But one of the ones I mentioned was mental health. And did you know when I mentioned that's a need that we're going to press into, people cheered. They applauded. And so that was instant. Okay, we heard right. The people are recognizing that's a need. That's where we're going to have to put resources. Let me give you a quick example. I've been reading a book called The Anxious Generation, Jonathan Haidt. Yeah. And what he says is we have overprotected this generation in the real world, and we have underprotected them online.
Wow.
And so as a result, anxiety is off the chart, mental illness is off the chart, all of these issues. And so our people instinctively know. And so again, building on what we've done, we've been able to update that vision statement. We were talking at lunch. Yeah.
And what I would bring up to you guys, when you do that, when the process comes from the people and you say back to them what you have heard them say to you, they instantly connect with that idea.
Yeah.
And you don't have the change curve issues, you don't have the enthusiasm issues, because the folks are on that
and as you know, one of the great things about our church has always been is that God has always put amazing people out there.
Right.
And so I get emails back. I mean, some people I didn't even know were sitting out there in the pews
who
have significant experience. I mean, one of them has connections straight to the top in Washington, D.C., working with the Veterans Administration and mental health. I mean, all of a sudden these people are emerging and now they're step forward and saying, hey, I can own that part of the vision. And so I think, whereas a lot of churches in a transition, and you've mentioned this before, the pastor announces he's going to retire. We've got to take all the engines offline, right? There's this, ends up being really a 5-year dip in momentum by you preparing the church well. Did things slow down a little bit? Sure, because people were, let's wait and see how all this plays out. But man, it was just more like a gradual growth, and now we're beginning to really see some momentum again.
Let's talk about one of the first decisions you made, and I've told you before, I think this is just pure genius. You decided to preach through the Bible in a year.
Yeah.
And got the chronological Bibles and what's that? Sold 7,000 Bibles to people who already had Bibles.
Right.
Now you're the leading Bible salesman.
Should have gotten an endorsement deal somewhere for that, but I'm not smart enough to do that.
It is a very basic decision.
Yeah.
We're going to preach through Scripture.
Yep.
Everybody supports and agrees with that. But I thought it was a master stroke of reminding folks of what they already knew, and establishing the baseline.
Yeah.
This is who we are. I know Mike's been here, now Mike's retired, but let's remember what this moment is always about. Thought it was a pure stroke of genius. Now, tell me about your thought process in getting there.
Yeah. So one of the things we did after we announced that I was the lead candidate for the senior pastoral is we did a series of town hall meetings. So again, I take notes, listen well, and I was encouraged on a couple fronts. One, we had our people saying, the world's changing, and most of our church folks, they're like, we know what we believe, but it was basically some version in these meetings of we need more equipped, we need deeper Bible teaching, we need something to really, we got to be solid on this stuff, And then the other piece that was interesting was we have 9 campuses. And so I thought I'd get some of, hey, as I'm, touring the campuses, hey, we need more staff, we need more parking, we need more buildings, we need more budget money. Instead, I got a lot of, hey, what's your plan? We like this hybrid model, right? We're contextualized to our community the way that we do it, but we're all one big family. What's your plan to keep us all on the same page? So I began to pray through that, again, stare at the wall with that a little bit. And those threads I realized begin to emerge. I thought, man, what would be more unifying than for all 9 campuses to really press people to walk through the Bible in their group, in their home devotionals with their spouse, and then we would preach kind of wherever we're at in the meta narrative, in the big storyline of the Bible. And so, I've not been in this seat before, like you've been. We have a bunch of creative, gifted people who are just waiting, chomping at the bit for that big idea to crystallize. Oh, okay, I can take this piece and run with it. So I rolled it out, as we were moving into the fall, right after I got the baton from you, and we set up to do that in 2024, last fall. And so the communications team starts to run with it. They develop a website. Here's links. We worked with the Bible Project. We worked with the Bible app folks to get our own version of the chronological Bible on there. We worked with the Lifeway people to sell their chronological Bible. Bluntly, I thought we'd sell a couple hundred.
Right.
Was blown away that we sold 6,700 chronological reading Bibles.
To people who already had Bibles.
That's exactly it, right? And that's the amazing thing. But I told the stories. We did a read through the Bible thing at our Station Hill campus a few years ago, and it was a great story. A 100-year-old lady whose husband, she was the widow of a Baptist pastor, was the first to sign up to do the Bible reading plan. She said, this will be the 61st time I've read all the way through the Bible. And I said, well, why? And she said, why would you do that again? And she said, because God shows me something new every time.
Every time, and so, every day.
Again, just these common rallying points. And so that's been what's been really fun is that everybody's gotten behind it. Our Nolensville worship pastor wrote a worship song called Christ on Every Page. As we were helping people see, a lot of people had never made that connection between, here's how this Old Testament story points us forward to the promise of the Messiah. That, just people making connections right and left. And it's been fun, Mike. I'll get stopped in Costco and they're like, hey, Ezekiel and this linen underwear thing, you got to explain that to me, it's just been really, really fun.
Or confess to you, I'm behind, but I'm catching up.
Yeah. Oh, sure. So, absolutely. But it's been this journey, it's been unifying. It's, and again, like you said, for us, it's a little bit of a level set to to say, hey, Baptists, we're people of the Word. We're gonna start with the Word, and we're gonna build from there. And so I can keep coming back and saying, hey, remember last year, or you remember that first year we walked all the way through Scripture. This is what it says. This is what it's about. So thanks for your encouragement in that. But it was great because I inherited a people used to biblical teaching and preaching, hungry for the Word. And again, for pastors listening, don't overestimate this. The number one comment we get at our campuses the most, at every campus, is that you guys actually open the Bible and you teach from it. Not just you read a verse, sit it down and tell some stories or whatever. People keep coming back. So some of the things that we think are attractional to people actually aren't.
Yeah, they're foundational to the folks.
Yeah.
So what's ahead for Brentwood Baptist Church? You've been in it almost a year now.
Yeah.
It's now your vision.
Yeah.
And your dream.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So when you squint and look at the wall, what's happened?
Great question. So one of the neat things, and you know this, you get invited to some different type opportunities when you're in this seat. And so a lot of it's trying to figure out which ones are worth it, which ones aren't. And I've been able to lean on you for some of that wisdom. But one of the really neat things, so I got invited to the National Day of Prayer, and then I got to speak at the Ukrainian prayer breakfast. We have a member who's heavily involved in ministry in Ukraine, and a pivotal time for them, of course. I got to go visit a church planting friend out in Las Vegas who is leading a church plant that's exploding. And you would think a place like Vegas, well, yeah, because there's so much gospel opportunity. People are desperate for it. I had the opportunity to go to Brazil. A pastor who showed up to one of our English as a second language classes here, he was on a sabbatical year, ends up being the pastor of the biggest Baptist church in Brazil and invites me down to speak. So all of a sudden, again, you're stepping back saying, okay, and all of these churches and places saying, will you partner with us? Will you help us? Will you? And I'm like, what do we have to offer you? You guys are already crushing it when it comes to ministry. Here's Mike is what my takeaway, and this is woven into that new vision statement. God's up to something. I mean, we believe that, right? But in particular in our age, churches that are committed to disciple making, multiplication, and missions, God is blessing, and they're finding one another in what I would call natural relationships and networks.
Yeah, the old conventions and all the traditional structures are morphing into these relational connecting structures.
Yeah, they're the traditional, a lot of the institutional stuff, and I respect it. You and I benefited from it, in our ministry development. But it's a lot of it's getting bogged down and it's getting politicized. It's bureaucratic. All of these kind of things. There's just some unhealthy things that have happened, and so churches are finding other churches that are committed to these things, and they're saying, hey, let's learn from each other. Let's collaborate together. My buddy in Vegas, I'm like, Steve, you're crushing it, man. You're baptizing tons of people. Why do you need our help? And he said, well, because your church has been at this for 50 plus years. And he goes, and your church has what I would call trellis. He said, we're vining everywhere. Right. We got growth, but and I'm a farm boy. What happens if that vine lays on the ground? Well, eventually the fruit rots. Right. You got to have a trellis to hang it on. And he said, we need the structure. Your church has figured some things out just because you're ahead of us, a few years. Could you help us with ministry structure and organization? You got to have a skeleton, So those kind of things are neat.
We've even had church staffs come visit us, and we've gone to visit other church staffs and stolen the good ideas where we could, and that kind of thing.
So to put in a plug, we're going to start our own one-day conference next year called Elevate. It's just a one-day. Come, bring your staff, Middle Tennessee, wherever you're from. Come and we're going to share with you some of the things we're doing in our playbook. Because again, some churches try to hold that to themselves. Right. Man, God's given it to us. We want to show you what we've learned, and we want to help you not make the mistakes we've made.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Right. And you'll be a part of that, and others will be too. I don't know if I told you that yet, but you'll be a part of that. So just so you know, contracts on the way. But we also want it to be a collaborative time. We want it to be a different type of conference in which we sit around some round tables and we say, hey, here's what we've learned. Now, what are you learning that we can learn from? Because I really do believe the future is in those. The Spirit is moving among those churches that are committed to doing gospel ministry in their communities, and they're less worried with all of the hype and the fluff and even the doomsday sayers. That's what we're seeing in these churches that I'm talking about. It's so interesting because you go read the books and the narratives and the statistics, and it's all doom and gloom, and the church is in decline, and churches are closing the doors, and yet we are seeing, not only in our church and campuses, but among our partners, the opposite. We don't have enough room to put everybody. We don't have enough parking. We don't, we're trying to figure out ways to come up with more space. And so praise God for that. But I would say really year one, those are my two big takeaways. People's hunger for the word.
Right.
Like you don't have to gussy it up. Like just give them the word, let the word do the work, and man, do ministry in your own community. Like, just man, get out there and do it, and find churches that are like-minded, that are partnering together.
I call it the Mother Teresa rule: go where nobody wants to go, do what nobody wants to do.
Yeah,
and the world will give you a platform.
Yeah.
When that happens,
that's a great point. Absolutely.
So
it's fun. Yeah, really grateful.
So what really surprised you?
Oh man. Again, I don't know that there were things that totally caught me off guard because I had an unusually long ramp, into ministry. But I do think there's what I would call a healthy weight that you carry for your people. There's a burden as you pray for them. There's you have a famous little phrase: inch over your head, mile over your head, you're in over your head.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Over your head, over your head.
Yeah. And so, those prayers of Lord, I now pastor a church that our membership is 3 times the population of my hometown. Like it's just surreal.
Yeah.
And so you have that moment a little bit like David, right? Lord, who am I in my house that you brought me this far? And so, but that's an increased desperation, right, in your prayer life. So I think that there is a unique weight and burden that you carry that it's just impossible to describe until, you're handed that mantle, as the Bible calls it, of leadership. And so, on one hand, I'm grateful. Power of the Holy Spirit, I just got to do what he tells us to do. Been well prepared, I feel like, for it. But on the other hand, there's no way to recreate it. And so, I would encourage those people listening, especially if you're not a pastor, pray for your pastor.
Right.
Like those emails, those cards, they mean more than you realize. Being supportive, asking good questions, all those kind of things, man. I've been incredibly encouraged. I've joked, my honeymoon period, first 6 months with all the emails were great to have you back, Pastor. Yeah. Second 6 months were like, great to have you back. And why aren't we doing this thing?
That's
or
right,
where's this ministry? Or we should start this.
But
so
tell them the story about your shoelaces.
Oh yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, if you want to know what it's like to be pastor of Brentwood Baptist Church, we have this time after the service. We go to a place called the Welcome Center so that we can engage in conversation. We have prayer partners in the room if you need to respond right then and there, but we also want to engage people in conversation. So our staff meets in a room called the Welcome Center. And so there's usually a line of people who are meeting me, and it's always just a toss-up. Some people just want to meet the pastor. Some people are visiting the church for the first time. Some people have deep spiritual needs, and so you pray with them, and then we have staff there that I hand them off to so we can follow up appropriately. But one guy waited in line like 15 minutes, and he came up and he said, "Hey, your shoelaces." And I said, "Yeah, what about them?" And he said, "If you tied them differently, they would lay down instead of stick up."
It out like that.
And I just thought to myself, man, if you want to know what it's like to be the pastor of a big church, that's the kind of microscope that you're under.
Sit out there in the congregation, and that's what he remembers. He leaves the church and says, his shoelaces were sticking up.
Yeah.
Well, I will remind you, my friend, that in the history of Brentwood Baptist Church, which is now, 60 years old?
Yeah.
There have been 3 pastors. Yeah. Bill Wilson founded it. I followed Bill, and now you have followed me. So you are in a very select fraternity.
Very honored. Big shoes to fill.
Those three of us. So
very humble.
But I am very honored to have you as my pastor, and I'm grateful for the time you've given me today.
Well, we're grateful for you.
That's Jay Strother. He is the senior pastor of Brentwood Baptist Church, my pastor. And I am Mike Glenn, president of the Engaged Church Network. Thanks for joining us on this podcast.